Um, the title of this webinar, Getting to the Core of the Common Core. My name is Vicky Tusken. I am a 7th grade language arts teacher in Geneva, Illinois. I'm also an adjunct professor for Northern Illinois University. And pretty soon, I'm actually going to shift gears and I'm actually going to be the secondary curriculum coordinator in DeKalb Public Schools. But tonight, the focus is really helping those of you who are going to be entering the teaching field to get a better handle on what the Common Core is really about. So in this webinar, we're going to touch on the origin and intent of the Common Core standards, the significant cognitive shifts and how those shifts impact instruction, quality sources of professional support and development as it relates to the Common Core. What I'm not going to touch on tonight are the controversies or the debates, or is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Because here's the bottom line, folks. We are in the midst of a major education initiative. And the best thing that we can do as consummate professionals is to understand and grasp the spirit of what this is about. So first off, how did this all begin? Oh, by the way, participants, if as I'm going along, if you could either up here at this, up here, you can raise your hand and let me know if you have a question. I will pause periodically for questions, or you can put in the chat box, hey, when you get a chance, I'd like to ask a question. So forgive me for that. So first off, how did this all begin? Well, to be honest with you, there's a lot of what I call urban legend when it comes to the Common Core. In actuality, it was a state-led effort to develop the Common Core state standards, and it was launched in 2009. It was led by state leaders, including governors and state commissioners of education from 48 states, 2 territories, and the District of Columbia. So again, there's a lot of misunderstanding in terms of how this all got started, but in actuality, this is the deal. It was made possible through their membership, these governors, in the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices and the Council of Chief State School Officers. And these state school chiefs and governors recognize the value of consistent real-world learning and making those real-world learning true goals. They launched this effort to ensure all students, regardless of where they live, are graduating high school prepared for either college, career, and life. Jordan, quick question, is PowerPoint going to be available to download? Beth, is this going to be available to download? Can you tell me? And Elizabeth, Beth is typing your answer because I really don't know. So while she's typing that answer, I'm going to go on. Okay, so according to Pathways to Common Core Accelerating Achievement, and I'm going to be talking about this book a lot, one can read these Common Core standards as a curmudgeon or as if they are gold. The key is this. As an educator, we need to embrace the Common Core because it's here. And it's now time to understand and implement. All right, so earlier I said we can read them as a curmudgeon or we can read them being the Common Core standards as they are gold. And according to Calkins and Worth and Lehman, and they're the ones who wrote the book, Pathways to the Common Core, they make some very important points in terms of why they are gold. According to Calkins and Worth and Lehman, the Common Core standards provide an urgently needed wake-up call. You kind of alluded to that in the little video. The Common Core also emphasizes much higher level comprehension skills than previous standards. I could talk a lot about this, but back when during No Child Left Behind, literacy standards really focused on isolated skills. But what we've discovered is those isolated skills really didn't elevate comprehension. So what Common Core does is it really emphasizes a much higher level of comprehension. And when I show you a little bit later why that happens in terms of its emphasis. The other thing Common Core does is it places equal weight on reading and writing. I was just at a meeting yesterday at my district office in DeKalb, and I had high school teachers openly say, yes, their curriculum is aligned with Common Core, but boy, they really do not spend enough time on writing. When you look at Common Core, reading and writing have to be equal. Also, the Common Core has a clear design with central goals and high standards. You know, you're going to hear me say several times tonight that it's extremely important that you spend some time just reading them. And I think you'll start to see the beauty of how they hold together. Common Core also demonstrate intellectual growth as it occurs through time, across years, and across disciplines. Again, a little bit, I'm going to show you a document on the Illinois State Board of Education website where you can see how across the years this document holds together. One of the biggest challenges about Common Core is it not only calls for proficiency, but complexity and independence. I think we kind of refer to that as the rigor of the Common Core. And for teachers, that is proving, and students, proving to be quite a challenge. One of the exciting things about Common Core is that schools and teachers are going to have to embrace this cross-curricular literacy teaching. There's no way we can reach the balance of literature and informational text if it's all happening in just a reading class or a language arts class. So there's going to be a real call to emphasize that cross-curricular or intercurricular literacy teaching. It emphasizes that every student needs to be given access to this work, so the implementation of interventions and scaffolding through RTI becomes crucial. Big thing about Common Core is the goal to put every state on the same measuring stick. I don't know if some of you have lived in different parts of the country, but there is no question that as states develop their own learning standards, as you move from state to state, things changed and the rigor changed and students were not getting equal opportunity at equal education. And then finally, and I think this gets lost, is that the Common Core respect the professional judgment of classroom teachers. The Common Core is a set of standards. Individual districts, individual states determine how they're to be implemented. And ideally that implementation has to rely heavily on the actual professional judgment of teachers. So the criticism I've heard is that it takes the teachers out of the mix, but in actuality, it puts them right dead center. Let's take a look together on how the Common Core hangs together. The Illinois State Board of Education provides this interactive layout that illustrates the progression of writing skills from kindergarten through high school. This is just one progression that you can find. If those of you could see it, if it meant clicking on the link, do so. I'm going to go ahead and click on it. I'm going to show you, this is right off the ISBE website, and I want to give you an example of how these Common Core standards really hang together. So if you haven't already, if you're not seeing a blue screen with blue sky, click on the link and you should be seeing a very interactive learning progression for English language arts literacy. You'll see up here I've clicked on writing. You can actually pick reading, writing, speaking, listening, language. And then I've picked what type of rating. I wrote argumentative. And then the way this is set up, it breaks it down in terms of the organization, development, transitions, style, tone, and conclusion. This is all aligned with the basic writing Common Core for this particular type of writing. So that's along this column here. Then if you look here, you got kindergarten, first grade, second grade. If I hit this little arrow, goes to third, goes to fourth, goes to fifth, goes to sixth, goes to seventh, goes to eighth, goes on into high school. And then we'll just kind of back up here. So what you do is you follow the progression in terms of, for example, introduction, organization. So when we're talking about kindergarten, we're looking at it using a combination of drawing, dictating, writing to compose opinion. When we move into first grade, again, we're talking introduction, organization. We introduce the topic. Here, we introduce the topic and write about a little more about it. Here, we introduce the topic or a text and create an organizational structure. And so the point I'm trying to show you here, and this is right on our own ISBE website, is that the Common Core was written in such a way that the skills, the rudimentary skills embedded in each standard are progressive. And as a student masters this skill and moves on to the next grade, then they build off of that. I love this interactive piece. So that's the whole idea, is that it really does hang together. Probably, though, the thing that probably gives most angst to classroom teachers as well as rising teachers is the idea of this shift, the cognitive shift in Common Core. This shift is what drives the rigor, which is one of the hallmarks of the Common Core. If you haven't worked much with the Illinois Learning Standards, this cognitive shift might not really strike you as significant, but it really is, because it really raises the bar starting in kindergarten all the way through high school, both in English language arts and in math. And it's actually this shift that's causing much of the controversy, because think tanks and educators are saying, hey, wait a minute, this rigor is too much, you haven't time tested it, it's not developmentally appropriate. And that may in time prove to be true, but the reality is, you really, to understand the Common Core and understand how to implement it, you really have to wrap your brain around the rigor. So let's take a look at what some of those shifts are. And of course, I want to start with English language arts. Part of the reason why I wanted to start with this is that the English language arts standards really don't just cover what we think of when we think of just English language arts. These literacy standards cover social studies, they cover fine arts, they really cover science, even though we have the new generation science standards, but anything related to literacy, which is reading and writing, speaking and listening, these standards apply across all disciplines. So these shifts have a huge impact on how teachers across all content areas, whether elementary or high school or in between, are going to have to rethink. Number one major shift, balance of literary and informational texts. And I'm going to show you a neat little chart that I found along with this particular outline through the Common Core Standards overview. So there's going to be a balance, and it's not going to be all about literature anymore. Real emphasis on literacy in the content areas. So across the content, across the curriculum, from language arts all the way through all the different content areas, literacy, both writing and reading, will be emphasized. Another big shift is increased complexity of text. Common Core is all about preparing our students for college, but not just college, but real world. So one of the areas teachers, and I could speak to this for myself, is understanding text complexity and how to elevate text complexity to really develop that critical thinking, critical reading skill. Another shift, text-based questions and answers. So in other words, the questions you're going to ask aren't going to be so much about what do you think or what do you feel about what you just read. It's going to be questions like, where in the text did you see to support your answer? That also then spirals into writing using evidence, evidence found in the text. That's a whole different set of skills, both for teachers to understand and teach and for students to use. And then the whole academic vocabulary in terms of how we teach and how students express themselves in their learning has been tremendously elevated. The balance of literary and informational text. At grade 4, literature 50%, informational text 50%. Now we're talking across the whole day. We're not talking about just in reading. We're talking about across the whole day, all content areas. But by 8th grade, it's 45-55. And by 12th grade, 50, and I mean 30 and 70. So you can see that the shift in terms of emphasis moves from stories, drama, and poetry to more and more personal essays, speeches, opinion pieces, biographies, and memoirs. This, again, big, big shift and change. Teachers of reading are scrambling, trying to find quality informational text support and sources of text that are relevant to their students. Another shift is in terms of the text types and purposes. And what I've done here is I lifted some of the writing goals. Now these are basic writing goals of the Common Core. They're not specific to a grade level. And what I did is I highlighted in red to show you what this shift looks like in terms of the actual Common Core. So looking at writing goal number 1, write arguments, support the claims, analysis of substantive topics, valid reasoning, relevant and sufficient evidence. 2, informative explanatory text, examine, convey complex ideas and information clearly, using effective selection, organization, and analysis of content. These are not the things that appeared in Illinois Learning Standards, I can guarantee you. Let me show you a couple more. 7, conduct short as well as more sustained research projects. 8, gather relevant information from multiple print and digital resources. 9, draw evidence from literary or informational texts to support analysis, reflection, research. So when you look at those kinds of words that are emphasized, do you see some of the reoccurring themes? Arguments, support claims, analysis, reasoning, relevant evidence, examine, convey, multiple print and digital resources. This is the kind of shift. This is the kind of shift that's going on within the Common Core. And this is why when you talk to classroom teachers that there's a little bit of angst. But I can tell you as a classroom teacher, this kind of shift has actually been very exciting. And we're really, my team of teachers, we're really kind of diving in and really challenging ourselves to really dive in and really change the focus of our instruction. I just saw a question here. Anyone know if there's going to be a PowerPoint notes available or if this is going to be available? Yes, and you need to email Beth Wilkins after the webinar and she will get it to you. All right, math. Math is another area where there is a big shift. And this is probably the area where a lot of angst exists because the greater focus on fewer topics. I will also tell you that with math, one of the issues that has arisen with math is that teachers, particularly in the lower grades, are really questioning the sequence of the standards, feeling that the rigor has been risen too high and that students can't nearly achieve or follow that sequence. This is where time will tell us just if the rigor is really realistic and aligned properly or if it's really off the mark. So, but the shift in math is first a greater focus on fewer topics. The standards ask math teachers to narrow the topics covered. This is a real challenge, and it's a different approach to teaching math than before. Before, it was with each grade level, you hit the smattering of skills, then the next year you hit them again, and then next year you hit them again, and then the next year you hit them again. So the standards really ask math teachers to narrow those topics down. The other thing that the math shift does is it really forces teachers to deepen the way time and energy are spent in the classroom. With these elevated standards, and I'll show you some examples in a minute, time and energy really focus on not just learning the skill and being able to perform it on a test and then move on. The way the students are going to master these standards is really going to be by diving in and really learning and understanding at multiple levels, which means focusing deeply on key areas at each grade. And I will tell you that many schools right now are really struggling with this because they're having to rethink their curriculum and they're having to rethink how they sequence it, and then they've got to give teachers tremendous professional development to teach this. I'm going to go through a couple more slides and then I'm going to pause for questions and then we'll go to the second half of this webinar. So, for example, according to Common Core State Standards Initiative website, the distribution of topics across grade levels would be, so if you're looking at K through 2, concepts, math concepts, skills, and problem solving related to addition and subtraction. Now, if I've got any elementary folks out there, this should actually be sounding a little bit of a warning bell because we all know, based on Piaget's a concept of conservation, until a child can conserve, they're not going to be able to subtract. And very often that conservation doesn't kick in till late second grade or maybe not even to third grade. But you can see that concept skills and problem solving related to addition and subtraction happens through K through 2. So again, the question is this developmentally appropriate? Is this teachable? Time will tell. In grades 3 through 5, same idea, concept skills, problem solving related to multiplication and division of not just whole numbers, but fractions as well. I teach 7th grade. I can tell you my 7th graders at this juncture still struggle with multiplication. They still struggle with division, and fractions, forget it. And this is 7th grade. And particularly fractions is a very, abstract concept. And yet, within the realm of Common Core, students are going to be expected to build their skills close to mastery in this realm. When they get to 6th grade, ratios and proportional relationships and early algebraic expressions and equations. 6th grade. I've watched my 7th graders dabble in this and hit the wall. But within the rigor of the Common Core, ratios, proportional relationships, early algebraic expressions and equations, which then will build into 7th grade ratios, proportional relationships, and arithmetic of rational numbers. And there's a big push within Common Core to begin linear algebra and linear functions. So as you can see, this is a major, major shift in terms of focus, in terms of skills, and really in terms of teaching concepts. And time will tell if, with all the proper support and best practices, if students will be able to achieve this. There's also some key things about this shift in mathematics, and I'm just going to hit a few terms for you because these are things, if you end up teaching math at the elementary level or at the middle school or high school level, these are the key things that really hold the mathematics standards together. The first is coherence. The coherence of the standards really link the topics and thinking across the grades. You know, that little sequence that I just showed you in the earlier slides. You've got to remember that the standards, just like in reading and writing for math, were created around a coherent progression from grade to grade. Also, learning hopefully is connected across grades so that students create new understanding with foundations built in previous years. In other words, what that's saying is if the foundation is solidly built in these students, then the new understanding that's created will be with the students taking some basic understanding, let's say of addition, or maybe a basic understanding of proportions, and then be able to apply that to a newer understanding and a new application that would then elevate that skill. The whole point is that each standard is not a new piece of content, but an extension of previous learning. That is very different from the way that math standards were set up in the past. In the past, they were just separate pieces of content, but the groundwork is laid early on, K through 2, and then progression happens building on that extension of that learning. So for example, we're still talking about coherence. For example, in a 4th grade, students must apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication to multiply a fraction by a whole number. That's standard 4. When you move into 5th grade, the students are expected to build on that skill and to apply and extend that previous understanding of multiplication to multiply a fraction or whole number by a fraction. So it builds on itself so that it's not just an isolated skill, but that from each level, then once that's established, then you stay with that basic foundation and then you build upon it. The other big shift in math, and I've alluded to this now in several ways, is the rigor. And I would say of all the controversy out there about the Common Core, I would have to say this is where a lot of the angst, because it's hard to say yet if this is going to be realistic. We're going to be dealing with students for a number of years who are going to have gaps, who have not had the benefit of experiencing this kind of teaching and learning from kindergarten on up. And so pulling those pieces together and allowing for real rigor is going to be a real challenge. When we talk about rigor in the Common Core, particularly in mathematics, what we're talking about is conceptual understanding, skills and fluency, and application. Let me just briefly explain what those terms really mean. Conceptual understanding of key concepts such as place value or ratios. So in other words, if they have a conceptual understanding of these concepts, they are able to utilize and synthesize them to see math as more than just a set of separate skills. I'm going to go back to the purpose of Common Core. Purpose of Common Core is to prepare our students for college readiness or for the world of work. And I'm literally quoting from the book. And so if we're going to build students understanding that way, we've got to aim for conceptual understanding, not just looking for isolated skills. And so if they have that conceptual understanding, such as place value or ratios, then they should be able, as they progress, to utilize and synthesize those concepts to see math as a way of applying to real life situations. Another key point to the Common Core is skills and fluency. You know, in reading, we talk about fluency in terms of the speed at which a student can read silently or aloud, which means at what speed they're able to fluently decode words and make sense of the sentences that they read. We also talk about fluency and speed in math, but what we're talking about is speed and accuracy in calculation. And so it's essential that students practice core functions such as single-digit multiplication in order to engage higher order functions, really getting these kids to learn their basic facts. And the fluency, the speed and accuracy in their calculation, it's got to be addressed in the classroom or through supporting materials and differentiation, as some students may require more practice than others. In my building, we have a thing called Math Lab. And we do Ames Web benchmarking 3 times a year in both reading and in math. But based on that Ames Web benchmarking, students who are not fluent in their math facts and core functions, they have extra support through Math Lab, in study hall, before school or after school, to give them that additional practice and application, because until they nail that part down, they're not going to be able to apply them to higher order functions. And then finally, ultimately, the whole idea is that the students be able to apply their math in situations that require mathematical knowledge. And correctly being able to do that depends on students having a solid conceptual understanding, which we just talked about earlier, and having that fluency, that strength in terms of being able to take those basic facts and then quickly apply them. I have covered a lot of material, and before we move into professional development and support, I really like to pause for some questions. So I know some of you have your microphones on, so you can either speak up, or if you want to type a question into the chat box, I'd really like to pause and see if any of you have any questions. Jordan is typing. Beth is typing. Just wait a minute. There's always this lag with Adobe Connect. What should teachers know going into their first job relative to Common Core? That is an excellent question, Beth. I will mention this a little bit later, but it's really, really important that new teachers, first off, you've got to know the Common Core standards as it relates to your grade level and your subject area, which means you're going to have to spend some time reading them. Now, some of the professional development resources that I'm going to share with you in a little bit, all of them are free, except for the 2 books. But you've got to become a student first of Common Core as it relates to your grade level and to your subject area. Then 2, what I strongly recommend to the undergrads that I work with, I tell them to get online, spend some time on the ISBE website, sign up for the listserv newsletters. Look, I'm going to show you a little bit the Achieve the Core website, and start looking at what schools and teachers are doing in terms of applying the Common Core standards to their teaching, and really zero in again on the area, grade level or subject wise, in terms of what you're interested in. In other words, you need to kind of be able to articulately describe what the Common Core means in your subject area. Where your particular district is in terms of implementation, that would be a question you're going to want to bring up in your interview. If it's not brought up, they may say, well, what do you know about Common Core? What's your understanding? A follow-up question would be really important. Explain to me how this district, how this building is going through the process of implementing Common Core. At what stage are you, and what role are teachers playing? Those are the kinds of questions then you should be bringing to the table. And I'll talk more about that when we look at the professional development. Jordan, how does Common Core fit with students who have disabilities and ELL students? Well, they have to meet those standards as well. I was just reading, actually this afternoon, in one of my listservs, and it was talking about this topic. And here's the deal. We're going to have to dig deeper and come up with ways to scaffold, support, and create interventions for our students. The standards don't change. How we help our students reach those standards, that is where the onus is going to rest. So that's my short answer. Same with ELL. Now there's something really exciting going on in ELL, and that is the whole approach and the pedagogy for ELL. And that is, before, the approach was find text that's at their reading level and meet their language needs in that way. Here's the problem for ELL students. Let's say you have a student who's in 7th, 8th grade, but he or she's reading at a 2nd or 3rd grade level. Well, unfortunately, when that approach is taken and the focus is on breaking up the language in terms of sounds and individual vocabulary, the ELL students don't gain ground. They're not catching up. And so now the new approach is to push the rigor of the ELL instruction closer to grade level, and then change how we scaffold that instruction for the ELL students. There's some big changes happening in ELL now, and the whole focus now is let's aim higher, aim closer to grade level, but change how we scaffold, because that's really the only way that we're going to be able to elevate and help them really meet this standard. Okay, I see another. I hope that answered your question. That I could talk a lot about IEP kids and ELL, but I think you kind of get the gist. IEPs are not a substitute for the Common Core. IEPs just help us put in place the modifications that they need. The onus is going to be on us to provide the proper scaffolding. Okay, so here's another question. Is there a best practice in the implementation of Common Core in a social studies classroom? My student teaching placement do 10 minutes of shared writing and reading daily, either using supplemental text or textbook. Well, on that limited, when you look at the actual document for Common Core, it includes social studies. So in actuality, social studies needs to be following the same guidelines of Common Core for English language arts as English language arts teachers are. So 10 minutes of shared writing and reading daily, either using supplemental text or textbook. It's hard for me to know how to answer that question because I'm not quite sure what the target standard is. In other words, what is the teacher trying to do in terms of, what's the target, what's the standard, and is that text and shared writing tied to something? One of the things that I am finding with a lot of teachers, they see that thing, oh, I've got to include more informational text. So all of a sudden now they're diving in to all these, articles of the week, but they're not really approaching it in a really cohesive way. Um, Actually, best practices, especially we're going to talk about like social studies, is you're going to look at an overall unit with key Common Core standards that have been broken down, or what we call deconstructed. And then the reading material and the writing material should be tied into that cohesive unit. It's this spot stuff where teachers are trying to kind of hit or miss is not what we call best practice. And so I got to be honest with you, my alarm bells are up a little bit when I see that supplemental text or textbook. It's got to be tied into, and the things that the student does over the course of a day, over the course of a week, it's got to have like a cohesiveness about it. Jordan, what are your thoughts about CCEE? I wasn't prepared to answer that question. Common Core Essential Elements. Yes, thank you. I was having a real brain freeze at that point. I think that that's a good place to start, quite frankly. For myself, a couple years ago, as I began to try to understand them and understand them with my fellow language arts teachers, that's really actually where I started, and really helped me understand the rationale and the power of the standards themselves. The actual document, which is kind of long, has a lot of tools and resources within them. And until you spend some time with them, you really don't realize how much is really there. So for myself personally, Jordan, that was one of the areas where a group of us actually started. We started reading the standards by themselves. It got a little dry, so we went back and we went to the essential elements, and we actually found that actually much easier to understand. Any other questions before I move on? Because I do want to talk a little bit and get your feedback on some ideas about how to prepare yourselves. Okay, well, let me move on. All right, so here's the deal, guys. One doesn't have to look or go very far to encounter resources that relates to Common Core. In fact, the choices can be absolutely overwhelming. A day doesn't go by where my email box at school isn't filled with Perfection Learning, Pearson, great books, you name it. Everybody's trying to sell a product in terms of trying to support teachers. So here's my strategy, okay? First off, you individually have to determine what it is you need to develop as it relates to Common Core, and then start there. You don't attack the whole thing. You don't, because that in and of itself is incredibly overwhelming. So you got to determine what it is in your realm, in your area, in your subject area, in your grade level, where you need to develop, and make that your first step. And then, key, you really got to read them. It amazes me the number of teachers that I work with who really haven't read them yet, or have read them spottily. You really have to dig in there, and you have to read them, and you actually have to read them more than once. One of my areas that I have spent a lot of time with Common Core has to do with writing. And it was from rereading and rereading them that those patterns that I showed you earlier and highlighting in red really started to lift off the page. And that helped me decide what areas do I need more help in terms of developing, say, textual support. How do I help my students analyze the text? How do I help my students define and defend an argumentative piece? So that's where you have to start. And don't let all the promises of all these books and webinars and things fool you. You got to prioritize, and that's the way you start. Also, it will depend on what school district you're a part of, and that will determine how much support you will need to seek out. Some districts are doing a great job of preparing their teachers. Some districts are not doing such a great job. Most districts are somewhere in between. Hopefully, you will be a part of a school district that has prioritized and deconstructed the standards. That in and of itself is a whole other webinar, but all I'm saying is that what districts have to do when they start to implement the Common Core, first they go through them and you prioritize the the power standards. In other words, the ones that are the most important. These are the standards all students have got to have, and they've got to work with them in multiple ways throughout the year. And then the rest of the standards kind of become the support standards, and you weave those in and through the course of the school year. Most school districts have already done this part or in the midst of doing this part. My district, well, we've kind of done it a number of ways, but now I think we are finally at that point where we've prioritized. Once that happens, then your school district, probably by building or grade level or department, will then deconstruct. And all that means is that they break those big standards down into actual skills that you will teach. And those actually become your learning targets. There's a lot of professional development out there in terms of how to do this, but for the most part, especially if you're a new teacher, this process here will be either in the process of being done or will already be done. So that really for you, you're going to be asking yourself, okay, then how do I actually teach these standards? And I hope that wherever you end up teaching, that that is where you'll get to be. So the thing you want to do first, quite frankly, is go to their website. It is amazing to me that school districts even haven't really gone to this website. It is a treasure trove of support. So I'm going to click on the link, and I would like everybody to do so if that helps you see it, or watch the screen here. And this is it. I mean, I'm giving you the link, and I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, look at this. It's absolutely amazing. There's a whole section here, of course, for the parents. But here, you get to read the standards. Here's the resources, how the Common Core was created. Here's the process, frequently asked questions. I just said you got to read the standards. So here they are. And these are not done by grade level. These are just the standards. And this is a great place to start. This is just such a great place to start. And then you build off from there. Also, here, there's all these great resources. Where do you think I got that cute cartoon? I got it from the Common Core State Standards Initiative. I mean, there's just so much here. There's general information, frequently asked questions, the shifts. I mean, it's all here. And when you click here, well, let's see here, I did that wrong. Go back. You can go, here it goes. If you go here, this will give you an overview of where it's been adopted, where it isn't adopted. These resources here, I think, are really, quite frankly, the most helpful here. This describes the key shifts in English language arts, math, statements of support. Here's application to students with disabilities, frequently asked questions, this myths and facts, all really, really good stuff. So I can't encourage you enough. Spend some time here first as you start to read and become common with the standards. Okay, then next, go to our great Illinois State Board of Education website. And in particular, when you're there, I want you to check this out. This is amazing. It amazes me how little teachers even realize how much is here. Look at this. This implementation guide for English language arts, implementation guide for math. You got balance assessments, alignment for rubrics, classroom resources, instructional support. So if I click on this, there you go. And it kind of breaks down the tool itself and how we can use it. Go back. If I click here, and then if I click here, here is a whole bunch of resources that you can click on. And remember I said English language arts literacy covers English language arts, history, social studies, the literacy side of science, technical subjects, and fine arts. This should also say fine arts. And so you click on these buttons here. Just click here. And then voila. There's all these tools, all these tools. And this is all free. That's the best part. None of this will cost you anything, anything at all. So that's, I'll just keep going back. So this is Classrooms in Action, a wonderful, wonderful. Also, if I go to the ISBE website and I go to Common Core, over here in this side here, if you scroll down, this newsletter, Capture the Core, it's wonderful. You click on it, and then I love this thing. It's just short and sweet, sometimes a little pithy, and then you click on the grade level, and there it is. Here's some research questions, Common Core claims by publishers. It's all really relevant information. Here's the thing about how different publishers are made that are claiming they've got all the stuff on Common Core. It really is telling you to beware. That's why I'm showing you these credible websites and places to go. And then it'll tell you the latest on resources here, which actually talks about what I just showed you, the Classroom in Action. Free sample lessons and assessments aligned with Common Core. I mean, really, and this is the way it always is. Oops, sorry about that. So I would sign up for this newsletter and utilize it, and I got that at the, let's go back here. It's all along in here. It's all along in here. Just lots and lots and lots of resources. And again, free. Okay, let's move on. Oh, it doesn't show on the screen. If you click on this one here, Jordan, can you click on that? It's in the ISBE website. I am so sorry. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to have to ask our tech people at NIU why, when I go to share the screen, why that's not showing up. If you click on that. And I do apologize. I made the wrong assumption. Jordan is typing. Oh, okay. All right. That's interesting. All right. That's good to know. That's really good to know. All right. A couple more. We've got Achieve the Core at http://achievethecore.org. And then we also have, and Achieve the Core is probably my other favorite. You can get to this link actually through the ISBE website, but the new school district that I'm going to start working for in DeKalb, we have utilized, oh yeah, thank you, Beth. Yeah, the links are live, so if you click on them. So I'm going to click on Achieve the Core, and if everybody else will click on it, you should be able to get to it. I love this website. I actually have, this one will, I actually have logged in and registered, and I utilize this a lot. But what happens is, let's say if we click on, if you want to be specific about what you're looking for, you put it in here. If you want to just go to subject areas, you go here. We're just going to go to math. And then this is just wonderful. You go, try this in your classroom. The big picture. What are you doing with the core? If you scroll down, actual stuff that you can have, tasks and assessments, lessons with supporting resources, your grade at a glance, understanding math, professional development. And this part here is phenomenal. These PowerPoints and videos are amazing. And again, it's all right here. And incredible, excellent material. As I said, DeKalb Public Schools, we're actively using this website a lot to help us with implementation of Common Core. You can see my screen here, B, and you click on this link. You click on underneath Achieve the Core at this link here, http://achievethecore.org. That's a live link. And if you click on it, it should work. B is typing. If you try clicking directly on the link, because I know some folks are doing that and are able to see it. Okay. Another one, it's similar while they're typing. Discussing the links on those pages, we can't see what links you are talking about. Oh, okay. And I do apologize, folks, because until I did this with all of you, I did not realize. Okay, let's try that then. You see where it says achieve the core at http://achievethecore.org. If everybody would just click on that link right there, http. If everyone will click on that, and then if you'll just confirm to me that you can actually see the web page. Excellent. Excellent. Okay. All right. All right. Normally I do webinars on GoToMeeting, and when I click on these things, people can see them. So I am very, very sorry. I just assumed by sharing my page you were seeing it. So again, I want to go back then to achieve the core. Please spend some time on this website. When you click on you can be specific in terms of your position, subject, grade. You can also go to a subject area, and then it's these tools. I mean, it is amazing to me the amount of tools and resources that you can have at your fingertips, and it's readily available to you. And I have used this. I've used Achieve the Core probably more than anything in my own classroom this year, and we're using extensively in DeKalb. Well, it only took us 2/3 of the webinar to figure that part out. I apologize, but I would encourage you, for any of these links that you did not get to see, please go back to the PowerPoint and get those links. Engage New York, which I won't spend time at, is set up a lot like the ISBE website. It does have some additional resources that Illinois doesn't have that I particularly like when I'm looking at of implementation of the writing standards. So that's why I included that one. There are 2 key books. If you're going to buy books, stay away from Key to Writing in the Common Core or Vocabulary for the Common Core. Honestly, at the beginning, you need to have 2 books in your library. This is the first one, Pathways to the Common Core, Accelerating Achievement. This is actually a book that I quoted quite a bit in this webinar. And what's great about it, it's not over the top nerdy. They wrote this book with the teacher in mind. It really breaks down step by step the actual Common Core. It's focused on language arts literacy standards, not the math standards, so you need to know that. But it really takes you through the process. Okay, first we're going to read them, and then they explain them, and then they talk about its implications in the classroom. And then they talk about how you break them down. And then they talk about how you start to collaboratively with your teammates or your teaching mates, common assessments, and how you use reflective practice to support each other. This is probably one of the most powerful books I've read in the last year. I wish I had known about this book 2 years ago. So this is, I would say, the #1 book to have in your library. And I would start reading it, particularly if you're preparing to interview. This would be the book for a job. This would be the book to read and really get comfortable with. And it's a great way to become much more familiar with a deeper understanding of the standards. The second book, which I am very excited about, is How to Teach Thinking Skills Within the Common Core, 7 Key Student Proficiencies of the New National Standards. I have just started reading this. DeKalb Public Schools, all the leadership, so all the administrators, including myself, we are doing a book study of this book. And then starting in the fall, the building administrators are going to be doing a book study with the teachers. So in other words, okay, we've wrapped our brain around the Common Core. We've deconstructed them. We've started to think about how they're going to implement, how they're going to impact our teaching. But this whole idea of rigor and critical thinking and critical reading and critical writing, how do you teach that in the Common Core? This book breaks it down step by step, and it really looks at key student proficiencies, such as how to analyze, how to synthesize, how to creatively write. And they give you, with each one of these proficiencies, a step-by-step method of how to actually implement that in your classroom. I even thought about like scanning in some of these tools. But once you've done this book here, where you have a deeper understanding of what the Common Core is, then you go to this book here, then you're going, wow, I could see myself implementing this and really beginning to bridge that gap while at the same time elevate my students' thinking and students' performance in the classroom. So in closing, this webinar sought just to get to the core of the Common Core. So what you need to do is you need to take time to begin to prioritize what you need next. What is it about your own understanding that you need to address next? Then you seek out the resources that will help you begin to implement those priorities. And again, that's why I've asked you, I've given you these resources to actually get you to see that. Also, join the conversation in social media or professional organizations. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter. I just got on Twitter about 6 months ago. Oh my gosh, there are so many amazing educators on Twitter. You get on their serves and you get their regular feeds. Oh my gosh, the amount of practical information you get. And a lot of those people on Twitter, those educators, they're in the trenches just like me. Also, please, 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 give yourself permission to make mistakes and learn from others. You know, I think for us veteran teachers, this has been our biggest lesson over the last couple of years. We kind of dove in there. We thought we were getting it. We thought we were implementing it, and yeah, we were kind of, but we've stumbled along a lot. We've made our share of mistakes, but I also have to state that through this process, myself along with my fellow teachers, we've developed such a collaborative culture because we're now supporting each other. We've got to be on the same page, and we got to get to the same understanding when it comes to the Common Core, so that now I'm working within a culture that's very collaborative, where we can learn for others and learn from others. So I really just wanted to leave you this quote, and it comes from the very end of Pathways to the Common Core. And to me, this really summed it up. In fact, the Common Core state standards themselves had it right when they said from the start that it must be teachers and principals who figure out methods for implementing these standards. I think that's that moving target that people are so intimidated by. For the process of figuring out how to implement the Common Core state standards will, in itself, be the pathway. What I've done at the end of this, every single one of these resources that I've talked with you about, I have here on these closing pages here with the link. There's the books, there's the links, there's a couple more links. And with my hope that that you will be able to start diving into some of these resources, get comfortable with the message of the Common Core, and then begin to prioritize what it is you want to focus your efforts on.